Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Agile Marketing. Go Agile without going crazy, right? That's what we're challenged to do today, and have some phenomenal speakers, thought leaders, and industry practitioners on the phone to join in the conversation and complete our Mind the Gap series. We've done 5 webinars on various topics regarding your organization, becoming more customer centric with your operating model. We looked at the MarTech stack, broke that down, building up technology strategically for your organization. We introduced the topic of agile marketing in terms of theory. And now today, we're going to conclude with talking about moving from the theoretical to implementation, really getting going with agile marketing and getting those benefits in terms of speed and visibility, and creating a culture around success and learning. And with that, I'd like to move along and introduce our speakers. Myself, Ed Brialt, with Aprimo, and I'm joined by Andrea Fryrear and Carolyn Ghaie from Aprimo. Andrea, how about if you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Fryrear. I'm the president and lead trainer for a company called AgileSherpas, and we are an Agile coaching shop devoted exclusively to training marketers. So I am an Agile coach, certified in all the fancy ways, and I'm also a longtime marketer. So I love coming in and helping teams transform the way that they work, and we'll be walking through in detail kind of how that works.
Thanks, Andrea, and thank you for joining us again. Excellent feedback from our last webinar. Now really looking into how that theoretical moves into practice, which is how we actually get value from it. So thank you. And also joining us is Carolyn Ghaie. Carolyn, how about if you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Yep, Carolyn Ghaie. I am the director of our activation services here at Aprimo, and my team works with our customers as we get them onboarded to the Aprimo platform. And really over the course of my career, I've really been able to just work with such amazing organizations as they've worked to transform their marketing teams, and such an exciting time to now work with these teams as they start to transition over to Agile. And Andrew, really looking to some good conversation here as we start to dive deeper into how teams make that change.
Awesome, Carolyn. Well, thank you so much. Well, let's get into it. Andrea, how about if you kick it off for us?
Sure. So we closed out our last webinar with this slide where we were talking about how soon the majority of traditional marketing teams are planning to start down the Agile path. And we found in a recent survey that we did at AgileSherpas that a very high percentage of traditional teams are planning to start within a year. So if you're not on that list and planning to go Agile soon, the chances are getting better and better that your competitors are going to be doing it, and then you're going to be playing catch up. So with that little bit of a sense of urgency behind us, we want to start talking about how that actually works and what are the steps that we can take right away to start embedding Agile into our marketing teams. Come on, little clicker. There it is. So the problem when we start talking about making these kinds of substantial changes is that we start thinking we've got to go big or go home. And it's kind of comforting because this type of attitude can help us postpone the painful process of change, because we think, well, if I'm not ready to change everything about my entire marketing department, I don't have to change anything. I can just stick with the status quo. But this is actually a form of cognitive bias known as selective abstraction. It's what causes us to see pictures like this of a major transformation and then just to focus on the end result, on that amazing after picture. And we don't think about all the things that happened in the time that passed between those two photos. So when we hear stories of transformation, selective abstraction causes us to ignore everything except the end. We just imagine that some sort of huge change must have happened. She must have, started working out 7 hours a day and she's only eating kale and apple smoothies all the time, and then poof, this magical thing happens. Of course, we know that there are actually a lot of small things that lead over time to this final amazing outcome. You make one small change that allows you, empowers you to make the second. Those two things build on one another to make the third, etc. And so really it's this gradual process that starts off slow, but if we do it right, then we can build up to this exponential improvement in a pretty short amount of time. But we don't have to just go big or go home. So we skipped the slide. So it's not just in the world of physical transformation that this kind of selective abstraction creeps in. We experience it in our professional lives as well. So when we hear things like digital transformation or agile transformation, then we think that we only have two options available. We can either make a big old change and see some big results, or stick with the status quo. And these are the only things that we can do. But really, we can make a small change today and then get a small win or learn a small lesson. And then that in turn leads to the next small change. So this is all like nice in theory, but I want to show you how this actually works in the real world. So the first option for taking some small steps that add up to big change over time is to design a pilot project. And we're going to follow Dave Noyle, who's the creative director at Sun Life Financial and has recently gone through this process with his teams. And so, like many of us who strive to do excellent creative work in the fast-paced world of digital marketing, Dave and his team had a bit of a process problem going on. They had lots of email exchanges where details are getting dropped and deadlines are getting missed, and everybody's just focused on trying to keep their heads above water. And Dave knew that his team could do better. They could produce higher quality work, they could be less stressed out, there could be more sustainability around this process if only they could make a change. The problem was, of course, if you just flip a switch and try to change every single person's way of working overnight, then, as Dave is saying here, it would be a bit of a disaster. There's a lot of risk, there's a lot of things that could go wrong when you take that go big or go home approach. So instead, they decided to pilot the process around a single project. And for them, it was going to be very small. So two-week sprints. So the entire project would be over in a month, and it was focused on a single line of business. So they did a really good job here of picking the right project. So it was small in scope. They had very defined parameters around what it was going to be, who it was going to be for, and there was no sense of urgency. So they were working on this project in Q3 of 2017, and it didn't need to be delivered until the first quarter of this year. So they had a lot of padding. There was no crazy deadline that was going to force them to abandon their commitment to agility within the project. They also picked the right people. So they had a partner that was going to be available. You know, when you have a 2-week sprint, you can't have someone who is unavailable for 4 days. They can't give you feedback for 4 days. That really puts you behind and puts the sprint at risk. So this person had to be available and flexible. The team was going to be evolving their process and doing a lot of experimentation. So they had to have a partner who was willing to do that. They also had to find the right people to be on the team, people who were committed to the Agile mindset and willing to be partners in this whole experimental process. And then finally, they had to come at it with the right perspective. And this was, again, from the point of view of the people on the pilot team, but also from their teammates, because these people were being pulled out of their core jobs to be on this pilot group. And so the team, the larger team, had to be trusting that this was going to be a worthwhile experiment. And they had to trust that things were going to come out of it that were going to benefit the department as a whole.
Yeah, Andrea, I think this is, I really relate to this, right? I mean, the right perspective and what we just talked through, it's so important when it comes to change, and it's really right where the cultural shift is for many organizations as they start to transition. I know when we talk with organizations about change, it's imperative that really sharing that right perspective is coming down from within the team. It's also coming down from leadership, that there are drivers in place which help push that same message from the ground level team upwards and outwards. And also part of making a successful shift really is the people that make up this pilot. So what we hear from our organizational leaders are when they're transforming their departments, right, they're wanting team members who are thinking cross-functionally. They should be willing to embrace the change for the greater good. When you're working with organizations as they're thinking about their pilot projects that they're going to select and the team members that are going to make up that, what are the other characteristics that really make for a successful agile marketer?
You know, finding people with that like entrepreneurial sort of mindset where they're willing to go in and not just follow a process because that's the way we've always done things, for them to really come in and focus on solving problems and coming up with innovative solutions, and to use a somewhat trite phrase, to be able to think outside of the box. You don't want people who are super traditional or very rule followers. That entrepreneurial mindset can be really, really helpful.
Awesome.
Cool. So a little bit more about Dave and how it went. The initial pilot was hugely successful. The business partner that they worked with was like, I don't want to ever work with a non-Agile team ever again. The results that he got were way better. The quality, which was what Dave was really after, was better. And then the speed and the pace of the work being delivered were better. And when I talked to Dave about this, he was hesitant to even include that benefit. He said the speed was way better, but I don't want people coming to Agile for that reason, because the quality and the benefit of getting better marketing in front of our audience is really what we were after, but it happened faster, and so that was sort of a nice side benefit for them. So if you want to do the same thing, if you want to pick a pilot project, there are a couple of things to consider. So we talked about the relatively short duration that Dave's team picked, a project that would be over in a month. That's towards the shorter end that most pilot projects last. So something that's a little bit closer to that 6-week mark can sometimes be helpful. So then the team has enough time to iterate on their process and actually learn by doing. You definitely need a project that has strong business sponsorship. So people in the organization need to be committed to getting it done. It needs to be on their radar, and they need to be committed to it. Otherwise, they're going to come up with some good reason for it to be put on hold, or for people to be pulled off of it to work on other things. And similarly, we need something that's critical. So it can be tempting to try this kind of experiment on something unimportant, but if you do that, you run the risk again of people feeling like there's other projects, other tasks, other demands that take precedence, and then the experiment becomes less reliable because they're getting pulled off of other things. And then once again, we see that spectrum from large to small. We need something pretty much in the middle, because we don't want it to be too large and too complex, because then it's difficult for the team to wrap their heads around everything that needs to get done. But if it's too small, then it's not a good representative experiment of the kinds of work that the team is going to be encountering in the future. So something that hits kind of right there in the intersection of all of those things will serve you as a good pilot project. And I would also add here, I don't think I have a slide about this, but I do want to mention that having data collection in place around the pilot project is really important. So being able to quantitatively prove that it was a success based on KPIs, based upon team satisfaction, ROI, whatever it is, make sure that that measurement capability is in place before the project starts, so that you can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was successful. All right, so we talked about pilot projects, and now we're going to talk about pilot teams, because this is just a little bit of a different flavor of getting started. So we have a new team to follow in this part of our discussion today, and this took place in the Netherlands in ING, obviously a really big international presence for them, but they decided to start this process at a single site, so their Netherlands headquarters, which had about 2,500 employees. That is not the small step, right? That's a pretty big jumping into the deep end process there, to go 2,500 people through an Agile transformation. But they started off with about 2 months of offsite meetings where the executive leadership got together and decided what was important, why Agile, how's this going to look. Lots of background planning was going on. And after the whole process, so they spent 2 months of planning, and then the entire transformation happened in about 9 months. So at the end of that time, they had sent 2,500 employees through the transformation into 250 multidisciplinary squads, which we'll be looking at how those are laid out in a moment, and then 13 tribes. So squads are put into tribes. Again, we'll walk through that exact structure. Interestingly, what they also did during this process was they basically fired everybody. They didn't say fired, they used the nice HR phrasing around it, but they asked everyone to reapply for whatever job they really wanted to be doing at ING. And they had about 40% of their employees switch into different roles. And so that was that entrepreneurial kind of engaged employee that we were talking about before, so that everyone's coming into this really excited and keen to make it work. So that's a big change. And this is how the teams are now structured. So this is the destination that they were after. So we have these squads, which are the cross-functional teams who can complete a project all on their own without needing to go outside of their squad. They have all the necessary skills and tools there. And then they're organized into a tribe. So we have here in this example 4 squads that make up a tribe, and they might all be focused on a single customer segment, or they might be focused on a single area of the customer journey. There's lots of ways that the tribes could be organized. In the tech world, this might be organized around a particular feature of software. There's lots of ways that you can do this, but you can see also that we have leadership within these groups. So we have product owners marked by the P, and they are responsible for making sure that the squad is doing the right work at the right time. And then we also have a tribe lead who's making sure that the work of all of these squads is in alignment with a larger organizational strategy. And then oftentimes there will be an Agile coach assigned to the tribe, and they're helping make sure that the process is working properly and that the process of continuous improvement is happening, so people don't sort of get stagnated in their ways of working. And ING obviously used this as a large-scale pilot for their global organization to see if it was going to work. And short answer is yes, it worked really, really well. They're quicker to market. Their employee engagement has gone through the roof. They have reduced their impediments and handoffs, so now they can get things out in front of their customers within a couple of weeks instead of a couple of months. And most importantly for them, their clients are now having a better experience with their technology, with their branches, with every phase of their encounter with ING. And all of that started with these pilot teams. So while the executives were off-site sort of planning and designing how things were going to go, they had just a few pilot teams working in the background. And what they did was create these pilot teams cross-functionally. So they were pulling from multiple silos, existing silos within the organization, and letting those pilot teams go and run and see how things were going to work.
You know, Andrea, this is awesome. I mean, what a dramatic shift for this organization, and awesome visuals of how a team could really be organized. You know, when we see our customers shifting to Agile, and we talked a little bit about this a little bit earlier, is if we want to start making this happen today, we want to start small. We don't see a lot of heavy change management programs, right? So customers aren't impeding that ability to get started. But there is some sort of level of education, right, that's needed to ensure these teams are successful. What level of education I'm curious, what level of education did ING provide to these teams, or what education would you recommend for these types of pilot teams trying to get started?
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to think about is what's sort of the groundwork that needs to be laid, and education is a big part of it. What tends to work the best is an education that's not process focused, which can seem kind of odd. So don't make everybody go through and get a strict Scrum training or a strict Kanban training. Like, don't make them pick that box so early on. Trainings that focus more on the Agile mindset and what that looks like and how that applies to the world of marketing is actually a much better place to start from. And making sure that people have a firm foundation, like they should understand the Scrum methodology, they should understand Kanban and lean thinking and systems thinking and all that good stuff, so that as they grow as a team and as their process evolves, they have every available tool at their disposal, and they're not limited to a really small subset of everything that could happen on an Agile team.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And then I'd imagine as these teams grow, they're starting to share those learnings out to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And the tribe structure that we looked at before really helps with that, because then you have squads who are learning things and then sharing them immediately with other people in their tribe. And so you get that exponential expansion of learning that happens really quickly. And so this is kind of how the squads and the pilot teams were formed. So pulling people from multiple parts of the organization so that you have everything focused on the customer here, right? Making sure that we can give them good marketing materials that are actually enjoyable, that they have a product that supports their needs, and that they have an IT infrastructure that provides them with a good experience. And then as the initial pilot team proves their success, you get those good data points that, yes, this is the right path and we want to expand. We can pull more people into a second pilot, and then finally everybody is in cross-functional teams. And the nice thing about this approach is before you're all done, people remain in their functional units, keeping the lights on, keeping things going, and there's less risk of mission critical projects getting dropped that marketing needs to make sure they're doing, that product needs to make sure they're doing, while you continually validate and expand the Agile approach within the department. Okay, so the important thing about the kind of structure that we were looking at, the squads and the tribes and the leadership, is that it provides this really important balance between alignment and autonomy. So we have the pointy-haired boss here from Dilbert, that if you have a whole lot of alignment but no autonomy, it's very command and control. It's very traditional, like, we're going to cross the river, you guys build a bridge, this is what we're doing. I don't want to hear a lot of discussion about it. If we have a whole lot of autonomy but no alignment across the organization, then the boss, the leadership is like, oh, I hope somebody's figuring out how to cross that river. And the employees are really happy, but they're all sort of going in different directions and not pulling towards the same ultimate goal. So what we want is to be in that top right quadrant where the leadership can articulate the goals of the organization. We need to cross the river, but empowers the doers of the work to figure out the best way to make it happen. So maybe it's a bridge, maybe it's a boat, maybe it's some sort of awesome zip line, whatever it is. The employees are empowered to figure that out because they tend to be closest to the customer, closest to the product, and they are going to have the best insight into how to make that happen. So once again, we see how this works, the alignment, autonomy, balance. So we get a lot of autonomy within the squads. They are given kind of the direction that they're going, but allowed to choose the best way to get there. But then we have the tribe, which is led by this tribe leader, who's ensuring that everybody's work is rolling up to the larger direction that the company as a whole is trying to go. So at ING, their squads ended up with 9 members or less, which is a reasonable size for people to manage interpersonal relationships. Communication is still pretty easy. All these people sit together. They have the daily stand-up that you often hear about in Agile teams, and they're cross-functional, like we talked about before. They have a wide variety of functions, and they're in charge of their own process and improving their outcomes. So they have their own KPIs, their own data around which they are measured, and they do have a product owner that coordinates their work. It's not technically a leader here. So they're making sure that the team has what it needs, that the process is working for them, that their work is aligned to the tribe's objectives and things like that, but it's not a manager in the traditional sense of the word. And one thing that we haven't looked at yet are these chapters, and they cut across squads. And so here's where we get that quality component that marketing really, really needs. So the chapter is based upon function. So here we might say all of the content marketers are in a chapter together. And there is a chapter lead here, which is an opportunity for people to sort of advance in the traditional way that we think about getting promotions. So we have a chapter that makes sure that content across all of the squads throughout the tribe is continuing to improve, and that everyone has peers that they can go to for help and advice and guidance and professional development. And this is really important, particularly when you have specialized functions. You need people to be able to talk to their peers, and you need them to be evaluated based on their performance inside of their job role, and chapters allow us to keep doing that. And then the squads are basically these increments, right? So the pilot teams that we were talking about before, you can create a squad, let them run for a while, and then as their process is proven, we can add another squad until the tribe is complete. And then we can do this with minimal disruption to the output of a department or a team. And then we talk about the tribes. So this was the collection of squads that are all working towards the same goal. This might be for a marketing department, this might be focused on the early stages of the customer journey. So this is the awareness tribe, right? Or the lead generation tribe, where we're just focused on that part of the journey. You could also organize a tribe based on a particular persona, right? We are all about the content marketer persona. Whatever it is, we are focused around this particular area, and that allows them to be very focused and to deliver an outstanding experience for that moment of the journey. And as we talked about before, the tribe is led by this leader who makes sure that they are in alignment with what the other tribes are doing, what the organization is doing, so that all of that fits together.
Andrea, I'm curious, do you often see folks within the different squads going back and forth, or what does that look like, switching between tribes to ensure that there's a mix of knowledge that's occurring?
Yeah, the chapters are really kind of where that knowledge sharing happens a lot in terms of functional units. The squads are designed to be pretty persistent so that you get the good like team dynamics happening and people learn how to work with one another and can evolve their process. So in this particular structure, the squads are persistent. This is like one of, dozens of ways that you could set this up. Some people do like to have more flexible team arrangements where we come together for a project and then we move apart and come back together. It really depends on the size of the team, and if you manage to create a high-performing team that's doing amazing work, then you probably don't want to break that up, right? Just give them more work and different kinds of work, because getting those amazing teams together is something that you don't want to mess with. All right, so finally, a quick look at some other potential tribes. And so we talked about kind of how you would organize this tribe. And at ING, they have the customer experience tribe, where they've got some tech people combined with some business people working around the customer journey from the first point of contact through the choice of a financial product. So this is one tribe, and then there would be multiple squads focused on different aspects of that within the tribe. Or we might have the enabling tribe, and this one I think is really interesting, especially from a marketing perspective. So this might be the marketing operations tribe, and their whole job is to make sure that the squads have what they need to function independently. So the right MarTech, the right even the right working environment, the right tech in terms of computers and the ability to communicate effectively with one another if they're not co-located. Obviously, this type of team would skew pretty heavily towards the tech side as opposed to the business side. And then at ING, they have the customer service tribe, which handles the customer from the time they pick a product all the way through fulfillment and then the ongoing customer experience management. That tends to go heavily towards tech because of, just the way that financial services are right now. But this might be, for example, we might have a mortgages tribe for ING. And so that is sort of 2 stories of how it has worked in other places. Oh, my.
Okay.
I'm ringing, apparently. That's really fun. Sorry about that, everybody. There we go. All right. And now we're going to hand it off to Carolyn while she talks about the technology that can support all of this.
Okay, awesome. Andrea, thanks. I mean, it was really so great to actually see some real use cases around how marketing organizations can start to structure their teams to really begin to implement Agile. Those visuals were really fantastic. Yeah, as Andrea mentioned, what we wanted to do with the remainder of the call is just take a few minutes and really, based on the feedback from the first webinar, talk about how technology can really support Agile teams. And we'll specifically show some areas of the Aprimo platform as well. And, one of the items that Andrea discussed in the last webinar was that she went through the 3 most common Agile methodologies, and she gave a really great stat from her 2018 State of Agile Marketing report that really 44% of Agile marketing teams are pulling from all the approaches and really working in a hybrid model. And that's really important, because as you start to think about what types of tools you want to bring into the mix to really support your teams, you want to be conscious that you're going to be pulling from those different models, and there needs to be flexibility as you do that. So once you've done your research and you've determined what the best methodology is that's going to work for you and your team, you're going to find that there are some commonalities across all of them, and that's really what you see here on the screen. So again, when you're starting to think about the tools that you want to roll out, you want to think about how are these tools going to support some of these critical components of Agile marketing, right? So whether it's the tools that are going to help teams better prioritize their work, so figuring out what they need to tackle first, really the importance of transparency and the insight that your teams have into the work that's occurring, not just within their team, but throughout the organization. And then, of course, the flexibility, right? How easy can you accommodate change as you receive, you're receiving positive test results, or there's new strategies that come into play. All right, so remember, as you start to shift over to being Agile, it really does require that there's organization in the work that you're doing and that there's rigor behind it so that you're able to accommodate that change rapidly, right? Agile doesn't mean working through chaotic processes. So what we have right here is wanted to start to share and talk about the Prima Platform a little bit and how it can lend itself to those Agile components. And we go in and we work with lots of customers who are managing their work in spreadsheets, and they know they can't operate in an efficient manner that way, and they especially can't operate in an Agile fashion that way. And teams really need visibility across their work that's occurring. And it helps both Agile teams and leaders to really have that visibility into the status and the key information about the work that's occurring. Right, and the other key about transparency and visibility is it really helps to break down the silos. And we have lots of customers who will store campaign results in the platform, whether it might be items that really worked really well on a specific test. We have some customers who are bringing in actual campaign data to look at the return. And so these teams can share that out with other teams, and it's tracked real time. And so I think about sort of those ING chapters that Andrea talked through, and the ability for teams to go back and be be able to reference a tool where they can access that information so that they can then use that to make their current piece of content or whatever it is they're working on better. That makes it much more easier when you have a tool that's giving teams that transparency and visibility that's occurring across different teams. And then also as you're collecting that information, of course, you have those metrics that you're capturing to really help you improve processes as you work through new tests or as you're working to improve how you operate in an agile manner. Okay. This here also, we hear from a lot of teams as well, sort of again, breaking down the silos and having better visibility into the different work that's occurring. Is a lot of agile teams want to see integrated calendars, right? So again, not just for what their teams are working on, but across teams. And so they can look out there to see what other campaigns are happening, maybe what other work is happening, so that we can leverage that work to help lift our campaign or help lift our specific piece of work that we might be trying to push out to market. Okay. The other item that we hear from a lot of our customers is just around visualization. And this view that you see here on the screen is a view of the Aprimo Agile board. And again, we heard from lots of marketers that the visualization of work is really important to their teams. And what we see at some of our customers once they start using the platform is that they're able to take this type of view or other views within the system and bring them into their status meetings. They can pull them up on the screen as their teams work with them to really have that really real-time visibility of the work that's happening and being able to see any conflicts or bottlenecks that might be occurring. So it really becomes that focal point for teams to understand progress and obstacles. So again, in this view here, if I just want to look at work that's occurring for a specific project, a celebrity gala that I'm working on, or if I want to see work that's occurring across a specific team, it gives me that really good visualization of everything that's going on. The other item is once you see this work and it's fostering that conversation around what's happening, most likely there's going to be some adjustments that will need to be made. And the ability to have tools where you can easily go in and make those changes, whether it's reassigning out to other members within your different teams, or whether it's changing the due dates as priorities might change, you can easily go in and do that here as well. Okay. And then of course, you know, the next piece, this kind of leads into making changes. And this is really helpful for agile team leads, right? And we constantly hear from customers that they really need that ability to understand resource capacity, right? To really accommodate work requests. So, you know, we're running through a campaign, wondering, can we fit an additional test in there? Or if not, what can we rebalance so that we can? So having the ability to really view all of the work that's occurring across your team members, being able to drill down into a specific team member to see exactly what it is they're working, just makes it easier for you to make sure that you're really able to have that clear line of visibility so that you really can work to meet those delivery deadlines, which unfortunately are always going to be there in marketing. Okay. So, you know, before we start to close out this webinar, I always think it's remember, and Andrea touched on this actually a little bit earlier, but it's always important that whenever you're making a change, right, you really want to define what are those stories that you want to be able to tell. And as you're making the shift to marketing, to agile marketing, right, it's thinking about those pilot projects, whether it's thinking about the teams that are going to be part of those projects or the tools that you want to introduce to support those teams. Really important to spend some time really thinking through the qualitative and quantitative success metrics so that you really can start to drive change through the different teams that are shifting to agile, and then also so that you can share out your success. So really make sure as you're starting to, again, think about moving to different methodologies or bringing tools in to support those methodologies, that you're taking the time to do this so that you can share out your success story as you start to make the change over to agile. So with that, Ed, I'm going to transfer it back to you.
Excellent. Very good. Wow. So I feel like we went on this complete 360 loop of a circle from, business problem to, theoretical opportunity with agile marketing, all the way into picking the right projects, all the way into picking the right teams, and then activating that with the right technologies to really operationalize the business discipline. So phenomenal. I mean, what's interesting in that is that, the time, the years that have gone on, this evolution where, Agile emerged from, which, Andrea, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was product launching, software development, right? It was a successful methodology. And marketers said, hey, we want that too. We've got those same problems. We have products that we need to get to market, campaigns. And if it works for one area of the business, why wouldn't it work for another? And it's proven itself. And what's interesting now is the technology is really caught up with the business discipline. So I'm feeling like the technology is really pulling marketers sort of into the future, so to speak. And so that was excellent. And let's jump to some questions here. And we'll do a Q&A. Let's see, the polls are open. Lots of really good questions in there. Let's go ahead and start at the top here. And it looks like this one was related to the team. So maybe back to marketing, product, and IT in terms of picking the right roles to go into the tribes. And the question is, where do agencies come into the design of agile marketing teams? We could think of folks internally, but more and more agencies play such a critical role in our processes. So Andrea, do you want to tackle that first?
Yeah, sure. Most teams are still going to be reliant on agencies in some form or fashion. Over time, that function may start to come more in-house, but when you do have an agency, whether that's an internal or an external agency, I think it's important to bring them in terms of communicating with them about how your process is changing and why and where they fit, and being very clear about expectations so that they know what they can do to support the Agile teams as they're transitioning and learning. I always encourage people, if you can get a representative from an agency to come to a daily stand-up, even if it's just on the phone, and to be part of the planning meetings and the retrospectives, then they'll become like a member of the team, basically, even though they're not there 24/7. And then you can mitigate some of the potential problems in terms of handoffs and bottlenecks with them.
Excellent. In this next question here, which is an excellent question, and it brings me back to your point around ING. How about you fire everybody, right, and then have them reapply? What a mental, what a mental shift they had to go through, right, to get to the right mindset. And I think that was maybe what sparked this question. But how important is executive support during the switch over to Agile, right? You couldn't have done that organically. That was a pretty strategic move by the company.
Yeah, that's very true. The best chance of success comes when you do have that bottom up and top down happening. So you have the actual employees who are committed and engaged and see the benefits to them, but they do have to be supported from an executive level, because nothing will derail this sort of thing faster than if you have your CMO or VP of marketing jump in and say, yeah, Agile's great, except I need you to do this thing for me right now. That teaches everybody else in the organization that Agile is just the nice thing that we do most of the time, unless I have a good reason to stop it. And that's just really, really detrimental to the process, especially early on. So having buy-in is key. And when I go in and help teams, we'll even sometimes have like a lunch and learn for all the executives where we talk about Agile and here's what's going on and here's how your behavior needs to change and how you can support the team as a leader, even if you're not there for every meeting and every daily stand-up.
Got it. And as you were talking, Hank put a question here. I think it was related to that, but if you could keep going on it, which is, when they have this, they're in this agile teams, right? What happens to their day job in terms of, is this a part-time thing, or is this all encompassing in their role?
Yeah, so that's kind of the pilot team versus the pilot project. So if you were on a pilot project, you might have multiple other things you're working on. The pilot team is going all in on Agile.
Right.
They are not having a day job, quote unquote. They are not taking any work that's not being handled in this Agile fashion. The pilot team might be working on multiple projects, but they would all be coming through the Agile approach. They're all going through the backlog and being tasked out across the board. They're not doing anything outside of that flow. And then for teams like ING who have kind of finished and gone through the whole thing, every project is coming through the Agile board. So an Agile team isn't working on just one project at a time. They have lots of things going on, and that's when the backlog becomes a particularly powerful tool, because that's how we can see what's the most important thing for the team to tackle next.
Absolutely. I can only see how it could be successful if you're, sort of fully dedicated. And then, next question here. How long do we wait? This is related to pilot projects, but how long do we wait between an initial pilot team to be extended over to other groups?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And it depends a little bit on the organization and how much of that executive buy-in that you have. Some people are just looking for the smallest indicator that it's a good idea, and then they'll throw everybody into it pretty quickly. I would say give it a month at least between pilot team rollouts, if for no other reason than the new pilot team or the new team or squad or whatever label you want to give it has time to coalesce and go through a proper kickoff, and they're going to experience some bumps early on, even if they're the 10th new team. Every new team has its own sort of idiosyncratic ways about it when it's getting going. So giving everybody kind of a month to be the new guys will help them ease into the transition.
That's great. Awesome. Great coaching. Great answers. Lots more questions here, but they're related to the content. Tina, Vicky, both asking, can we get access to the content? Can we get these slides? Absolutely. And also asking about if we missed the previous webinars, how do we see those? That's a perfect transition to the slide here. So this actually ends our Mind the Gap series on the 5 webinars that we put together, and all that content, the decks, the webinars, the recordings, all available on aprimo.com in the resource hub. We actually have a fully dedicated landing page for it. Also, to keep the learning going, Andrea offered a pretty significant discount on one of her learning programs, which is available on AgileSherpas. And I want to thank you for that, Andrea. Again, phenomenal discussions. Really, I think, demystifying this idea of what agile marketing is. Love the stories, and then the technology with the programmatic and algorithmic insights. Right? It's technology can help. I can imagine like all the sticky, like this emerged, and there were sticky notes all over walls, right, Andrea? When this thing started.
Yep. We're keeping 3M in business, I think, with the sticky notes.
Yeah, but when you wrap technology around that too, you've got the insights that technology provides. Well, excellent. Thank you, everybody. First of all, Andrea, awesome. Thank you so much. Carolyn, thank you so much as well. Just some great storytelling today. Closing a loop and providing a complete story around some great concepts that we need to drive into our organizations, whether it's our organization or our customers. And thank you, everybody who dialed in today. I hope you really enjoyed the content that was put out there. Again, reach out and keep the conversation going and consume content, all available at the resource hub at aprimo.com. With that, have a great day.